Welcome. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASI. And thank you. This is episode number 38. Now, today's episode, we just got a couple of things to get into. We're going to start off the episode with my question of the week. Then, of course, we're going to finish with my NFL picks for divisional round of the playoffs. There's 4 games this week. I'm going to pick every single game. And unlike the wild card week, I'm also going to give you my predicted score for each of these games. So let's get into it. So to start this episode, we are going to get into my question of the week. Now, this question of the week has to do with these NFL playoffs. Now, there are 8 teams left, and I would say at least 4 to 5 of them are teams that everybody essentially expected to be here. Some of the other ones are a bit unexpected. And this is a lot of times where most of the fans of the NFL teams are out of the playoffs. So a lot of fans that are still watching games are rooting for certain games based off of either players they like or matchups they want to see for certain narratives and things of that nature. So, with that being said, the question of the week is, which one of these specific matchups would you prefer to see in the Super Bowl? Now, the reason why I want to be specific is I'm only going to give you 4 different choices. And in each one, it's a different team. So no team is used more than once. Obviously, there are multiple different combinations of which teams can play the other. So essentially in the Super Bowl, each team has a chance of playing 4 different teams in the Super Bowl, right? But I'm only giving you 4 in this case, meaning that each team that I name is only in one other matchup. So you can't give me some other matchup. That's not the point of this conversation. It means if you had to choose between these 4 options, and these 4 only being the option for 2 teams that are going to meet in the Super Bowl, which one of these games would be the one that you would most want to see in this year's Super Bowl? So, for starters, the first matchup option I'm going to give you is the Buffalo Bills versus the Detroit Lions. Now, in this matchup, the reason why I pit these 2 teams together is for a couple of reasons. One, both teams are explosive offensively. So I know for a lot of those people who like to see a lot of scoring, they feel like this would be the type of game they want to see. And the other reason why I picked this matchup is these are 2 of the teams that have never won a Super Bowl. So as from an underdog perspective of if you're a fan of this team, you've never seen your team win ever in the existence of your team. So the idea of 2 teams who've never won the Super Bowl being in the Super Bowl so that not only will one team have to win the Super Bowl, but then the other team will continue their lack of winning a Super Bowl ever. So that would be intriguing. So the first option is Buffalo and Detroit. Now the next option is the Kansas City Chiefs against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the reason I chose this as an option is because it's a rematch. And it's a rematch of a Super Bowl from a couple of years ago that most people would agree was a really entertaining Super Bowl. It had a lot of ups and downs. It had scoring, but it also had crucial defensive plays. And it was back and forth game. It had great play on both sides for both players. And people generally like to see rematches. It's a matchup between 2 storied franchises, 2 franchises that have really deep fan bases, and it's a rematch in the sense of, Travis Kelce last time played against the Eagles in the Super Bowl against his brother, but this year his brother is retired, so the perspective of getting Jason Kelce's perspective of watching his old team play against his brother, is he going to still root for his old team with his old teammates, or is he going to root for his brother since he's no longer on the team? I think that definitely would be a narrative that would be talked about during the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. Now, the third option I'm going to give you is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Los Angeles Rams. Now, in this example, you're talking about 2 teams that are capable of scoring a lot of points. They both have explosive weapons on the offense. For Baltimore, most of their explosive offense comes from their running game with Lamar and Derrick Henry. Whereas from the Rams, most of their explosive offense comes from their receivers with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So you could get both offenses with explosive players, but they also have defensive players that are also just as explosive and have been playing well as of late. You also get two important narratives behind each team. For Baltimore, you get the narrative of, Lamar breaking barriers and showing that a quarterback that looks like him and plays like him being able to win the Super Bowl. And then you get the narrative from the Rams of them dealing with the tragic circumstances that have been going out here in the LA area with all the fires that have caused so much devastation. So both teams have huge narratives that can be built around them, and it would create a good game. Now, the last option I'm going to give you would be a Super Bowl between the Houston Texans and the Washington Commanders. Now, this one, you're like, why would I pick this one? Well, because this one would be intriguing for two different reasons also. One, both of these teams are the biggest underdogs in their games, right? If either of these teams made it to the Super Bowl, it would be shocking. It would be something that people will be talking about for weeks to come, because they'd have to pull off an upset this week and an upset the next week just to make it to the Super Bowl. Both of these teams are also the lowest seeds remaining in the playoffs. So, like I said, there would be that being well above expectation part of the narrative. The other part is both of these teams come in with very, very young quarterbacks. So on one hand, you have Jaden Daniels, who is a rookie quarterback who's obviously going to run Rookie of the Year. And then you have CJ Stroud on the other side, who won Rookie of the Year last year and is showing that you can still be successful early on. He's basically the prototype for what people are seeing again in Jaden Daniels this year. So it would be a very exciting matchup for people who like to see underdogs, who like to see teams who've beaten the favorites that have the much larger fan bases. So would you prefer that? So that is your option for question of the week. Please, again, when you respond, and the whole point of question of the week is for everybody watching to respond. So that means if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on Instagram, please comment below which of these options you choose, and you can only choose one of these. Don't give me some other combination of two teams. You have to choose one of these options. Again, your options are Buffalo versus Detroit, Kansas City versus Philadelphia, Baltimore versus the Rams, or Houston versus Washington. Which one of those matchups would you prefer to see in the Super Bowl? Now, lastly, we're going to get into my divisional round playoff picks for this week in the NFL. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 games this week, and I'm going to give you my predictions for each game, and I'm going to give you the score for each game in the order that the games are taking place. So the first game is between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs are at home. They had the bye. They're number 1 seed in the conference. They had the best record in the league. They are currently 8-point favorites at home. Now, the reason why this spread is so large for 2 reasons. One, Kansas City, since Patrick Mahomes has been the starter, has never lost in a divisional round game. As you know, Patrick Mahomes has always at least made it to the AFC Championship game every year that he's been a starter. So statistically, it seems almost inevitable that the Chiefs should win this game. Also, the Chiefs just beat Houston a few weeks ago. And in that game, they injured one of Houston's most dynamic receivers that they have on their team, especially this coming from a team that's already suffered from a lot of injuries in their receiving corps. Also, the Chiefs have been playing better at the end of the season, whereas Houston looks like they weren't playing as good until last week in their playoff game. So I understand why the line is 8 points. Everybody knows that I am a Chiefs fan, so I'm not going to sit up here and tell you some kind of lie like, no, I think that the Chiefs are going to lose. I don't. But I am, however, weary of this outcome and do think that Houston has a solid chance of winning this game. Now, I think that Kansas City has been clicking, and I understand why they rested all their players for Week 18. I understand why they felt like they needed that, but I do feel like there is a chance that they could start off with a little bit of rust. And Houston, on the other hand, has great momentum and a lot of confidence coming off their last game against the Chargers. They dominated the Chargers, and their defense was spectacular. So if you add in a team that's been flying around defensively, playing with a lot of confidence, playing with nothing to lose because nobody essentially expects them to win except for Houston Texans fans, and a team that has had a lot of time off and could potentially start rusty. And if the game starts rusty and it's close and Houston gets out early, this is not like the Chiefs team from years ago when Houston started up 24-0 on them in the playoffs and then they came back and won by a blowout. This team is not that explosive offensively. So if Houston can stop them early and then also score, it could make things a little shaky. Now, with that being said, I do think that both of these defenses are going to show that they are top tier, and so I don't think this score is going to get out of hand. I don't think the Chiefs will cover the spread, but I am predicting them to win. My final score prediction is the Chiefs 24 and Houston 20. So I do have the Chiefs winning this game and moving on, but not covering the spread. Now, the second game in this divisional round is the Detroit Lions at home against the Washington Commanders. Now, this is another game with the number one seed, a team that has had a lot of injuries and definitely needed the rest. It's also another team that has been playing better as of late. Their last game against Minnesota, arguably their best game of the season. Considering the injuries they have on the defense and the way their defense looked against Minnesota, would seem to think that they've been able to overcome all of their injuries and they'll be really, really difficult to beat come playoff time. Now comes in an explosive young team who doesn't know any better. They don't know that they're supposed to lose. The Washington Commanders not only are an explosive team, but they have a mobile quarterback, and every Detroit Lions fan will tell you that in the history of the Lions, they have struggled playing against mobile quarterbacks. So, could this be one of those games where, their defense gets torched the way it had been torched earlier in the season? And could Jaden Daniels lead his team to a victory when nobody's expecting it? I definitely think that's possible, but I think that Detroit is going to be able to hold on for the win. I just think at the end of the day, Detroit's offense is going to be a little bit too much for Washington's defense. I think it'll be one of those back and forth games where it may come down to who has the ball less and who makes the least amount of turnovers. Both quarterbacks could potentially cause turnovers. You got a rookie quarterback on one side, and then you got another quarterback who's experienced, but every blue moon has one of those games where he just throws a bunch of picks, as was the case earlier in the season when he threw 5 picks in a game, but they won. So all of those things could happen, but like I said, at the end of the day, I'm sticking with Detroit to win this game, but I do not think they're going to cover the 9.5 point spread. I'm picking Detroit to win, with Detroit scoring 30 and Washington scoring 27. So a high-scoring game, but I think that Detroit pulls off the win by 3 points. Now, the next game in the divisional round is the first game on Sunday. It is the Philadelphia Eagles against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this game to me is going to be the closest game of the entire playoff round. I think both of these teams are evenly matched. Now, Philadelphia is currently favored by 6 points, and to me that makes sense. Philadelphia did beat the Rams earlier in the year, and if you recall from my picks before the playoffs started, I did project that I was predicting Philadelphia to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. So to be honest, that is the only reason that I'm picking Philadelphia to win this game. I know it sounds crazy, but when I was first going through the matchups, even though I had the Rams winning their wild card match and I had Philadelphia winning their wild card match, originally before the playoffs started, I had Philadelphia winning this match. more so based on the fact of how they had looked and how they looked in their matchup earlier in the season. But if I'm being honest, based on how Philadelphia looked last week and based on how the Rams looked last week, I think the Rams should win the game. Even though they're on the road, they're going across country, they are playing on a short week, I still think the Rams should win this game. But I'm being stubborn, and I'm honest about it. I'm being stubborn. I'm picking Philadelphia solely because I picked them before the playoffs to make it to the Super Bowl, and I'd rather be right on that pick than anything else. So I'm picking Philadelphia to just figure it out. The last time they played, Saquon Barkley went bonkers. I think he had over like 250 yards total, which is crazy between rushing and receiving. I don't think he's going to get that much, but I do think Saquon is still going to be able to be effective. So I'm picking this one to be a tight game. I'm saying Philadelphia will score 21 and the Rams will score 20. I think both defenses will be very effective in shutting down the other's offense for the most part, so it'll be a low 40s compiled type game. But yes, I'm sticking with Philadelphia just based on my previous pick, but in no way would I be shocked if the Rams pulled off the win. Now, the last game for the divisional round is the game that's being most anticipated by everyone. It's the game between the two teams that have the front runners for MVP. It's the Baltimore Ravens playing on the road at Buffalo. Now, Baltimore is favored by 1 point at this point. Now, both of these teams did play each other earlier in the season, and Baltimore won this game easily. Now, a lot of people are saying that game was so long ago that they're kind of throwing it out, which is why the spread's only 1. But Buffalo is at home, and a lot of people believe that Buffalo is the biggest threat to beating Kansas City in this playoffs. So a lot of people are hoping that Buffalo can get the win so that if Kansas City beats Houston, Buffalo has a solid chance of knocking off Kansas City. Now, despite this being the game against I guess you could say, the highest ranked matchup where both teams are potentially capable of winning a Super Bowl, there's a lot of commentators that are predicting that this essentially will be the Super Bowl and that the winner of this game will be the Super Bowl winner. This, for me, is the game that I expect to have the largest margin of victory. That's right. I know it sounds crazy, but I am predicting that Baltimore will win on the road in Buffalo and that they're going to win easily. I know, it sounds crazy, but this is just the feeling that I get. I feel like it's just a bad matchup. For any of you who are familiar with boxing, the term I'm going to use is very commonly used in boxing matches, and it's styles make fights. Meaning you might have two guys who, when fighting everybody else, it looks like, oh, there's a clear-cut winner if they were to fight each other. But because of their styles of fighting, when they fight each other, the person who's losing to everybody else can beat this person who was beating everybody else. I think that's the type of thing that applies to this matchup. I think that the way Buffalo is constructed and the way Baltimore is constructed, it's not a good matchup for Buffalo. Now, is it possible Buffalo could win? Of course. Josh Allen, to me, is the MVP of this year, and he's proven so far during the season that he can elevate his team beyond levels that they are expected to. So, could he do that again in this game? Of course. But I don't think it's going to happen. I am predicting that Baltimore is going to score 38 points and Buffalo is going to score 20. That's right. I'm picking Baltimore to win by 18 points. And I know, like I said, it sounds crazy. This is the one game out of the 4 that has the smallest margin of victory. It's the one game out of the 4 where both teams are expected to be legit Super Bowl contenders. The game is put last in this slot for a reason because it's going to be the most hyped game. It's going to be the most watched game, the most anticipated game. Yet this is the game that I feel like is not going to be close. And I think Baltimore is going to walk away with it. I feel like Derrick Henry is going to rush for over 100 yards. I think Lamar Jackson will rush for at least 60 yards. I think their offense is going to score almost every time they get the ball. And I think Baltimore's defense is going to create a couple of crucial turnovers that'll stretch this lead. Like I could see Baltimore scoring, then Buffalo scoring, and then Baltimore scoring, and then Buffalo scoring, and then looking like, oh, this is going to be back and forth. And then Baltimore scores again, and then gets like a pick six. So then it's like a 2-touchdown lead. Then they create a fumble, and it's a 3-touchdown lead. And that kind of being the sequence of events to where it might start off close, but it doesn't end close. So that's my prediction for that game. I have Baltimore winning easily. So that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.